In the vast and remote wilderness of Alaska, a chilling story unfolded that still sends shivers down the spines of those who hear it. This is the story of Robert Hansen, a man who became known as the Butcher Baker for his horrifying crimes. He wasn't just a serial killer. He was a predator who hunted his victims in one of the most gruesome ways imaginable, like animals in the wild. Robert Hansen was born on February 15, 1939, in Estherville, Iowa. From a young age, he was an awkward and shy boy, often bullied by his peers for his acne and stutter. His father, a strict and demanding man, pressured him to work long hours at the family bakery, which left little time for socializing. These early experiences left Hansen with deep-seated resentment and anger, particularly towards women who had rejected him throughout his life. This bitterness would later manifest in the most disturbing way possible. In 1967, Hansen moved to Anchorage, Alaska, with his wife and children, seeking a fresh start. On the surface, Hansen appeared to be a typical family man. He was a successful baker, a skilled hunter, and even held a record in bow hunting. But beneath this facade lay a twisted mind, driven by dark desires. Hansen's hunting skills were extraordinary. He loved the thrill of tracking and killing wild animals in the Alaskan wilderness. But over time, this thrill wasn't enough for him. His fantasies grew darker, and he began to imagine hunting humans instead of animals. This terrifying thought soon became a reality. Between 1971 and 1983, Hansen embarked on a killing spree that would shock the world. His modus operandi was as horrifying as it was unique. Hansen would target young women, usually prostitutes or exotic dancers, whom he believed wouldn't be missed if they disappeared. He would lure them into his car with the promise of money or a ride, then take them to his home where he would imprison them. At his house, he would sexually assault and torture them, but the horror didn't end there. Once he had broken their spirits, Hansen would drive his victims to the remote wilderness in his private plane, often to a secluded area near the Kinnick River. There he would release them, only to hunt them down like wild game. Armed with a rifle, Hansen would track his terrified victims through the dense forest, toying with them before delivering the fatal shot. For Hansen, this was the ultimate thrill, a twisted game of life and death where he held all the power. Hansen meticulously planned his murders, making it difficult for authorities to catch him. He buried his victims in shallow graves in the wilderness, often marking the locations on a map. At the time of his arrest, police found a map in his home with X's marking where he had buried his victims. This map would later become crucial evidence in linking him to the murders. For years, Hansen managed to evade capture. He blended in perfectly with the Anchorage community, earning the trust of his neighbors and even law enforcement. But in 1983, his reign of terror came to an end when a 17-year-old girl named Cindy Paulson managed to escape from his clutches. Paulson, a prostitute, was kidnapped by Hansen and taken to his home, where he raped and tortured her. However, she managed to escape while Hansen was preparing his plane for another hunting trip. Running barefoot and handcuffed, she flagged down a passing truck and was taken to safety. Paulson's detailed account of her ordeal provided the police with the evidence they needed to investigate Hansen further. At first, Hansen denied everything, using his reputation as a mild-mannered family man and local baker to his advantage. But when authorities searched his home, they found jewelry belonging to several of the missing women, along with the chilling map of grave sites. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Hansen confessed to the murders. He admitted to killing at least 17 women, though authorities believed the actual number could be higher. His methodical and cold-blooded approach to murder was unlike anything they had ever seen. He was eventually convicted of 4 murders and sentenced to 461 years in prison, without the possibility of parole. Robert Hansen's crimes left a deep scar on the Alaskan community. His ability to live a double life, one as a respected member of society and the other as a sadistic killer, has been the subject of numerous documentaries, books, and even a movie titled The Frozen Ground, starring Nicolas Cage and John Cusack. Hansen's case is a grim reminder of the darkness that can hide behind the most ordinary of facades. He was a man who turned his passion for hunting into something monstrous, preying on the most vulnerable members of society for his twisted pleasure. His story is one of cruelty and horror, a tale that haunts the memory of those who lived through it and those who continue to study the terrifying depths of the human mind. The Alaskan wilderness, once a place of beauty and tranquility, became the hunting ground for one of America's most notorious serial killers. Robert Hansen died in prison in 2014, but the horror of his crimes continues to linger. A dark chapter in the history of Alaska. If this story gripped you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that uncover the terrifying and dark sides of human nature. In the annals of American crime history, few names evoke as much horror as Ed Gein. Known as the Butcher of Plainfield and the inspiration for numerous fictional killers in horror films, Gein's crimes shocked the nation and remain a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity. His story is a dark and disturbing journey into madness, a tale that turned him into America's nightmare. Edmund Emil Gein was born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Raised in a deeply religious household, Gein was the second of two children born to George and Augusta Gein. His father was an alcoholic who died when Ed was just a boy, leaving his mother, a strict and domineering woman, to raise him and his older brother Henry on her own. Augusta instilled in Ed and his brother a fear of the outside world and a belief that all women, except her, were evil. Growing up, Ed Gein was isolated and socially awkward. He had few friends and was often teased by other children. His mother's overbearing influence left him emotionally stunted, and her death in 1945, when Ed was 39, left him utterly shattered. After Augusta's death, Gein lived alone on the family farm in Plainfield, Wisconsin, a secluded area that would become the site of his horrific acts. Gein's first taste of infamy came when he was linked to the disappearance of a local woman named Bernice Worden in November 1957. Worden was a local hardware store owner who vanished without a trace. Her son, a deputy sheriff, discovered a series of gruesome clues leading to Gein's property. What authorities found on Gein's farm was beyond anything they could have imagined. Upon searching Gein's house and barn, police were horrified to discover a macabre collection of human remains. The findings included skulls used as decoration and bones used as various household items. A mask made from the skin of a woman's face, worn by Gein as a grotesque disguise. Various body parts, including organs and limbs, preserved in jars and hung throughout the house. Items made from human skin, including a suit fashioned from skin and a lamp made from a human skull. The discovery of these items was shocking. Gein had not only committed murder, but had also engaged in acts of necrophilia and grave robbing. It was revealed that Gein had exhumed bodies from local cemeteries, using the remains to satisfy his twisted fantasies. His primary motive was to create a woman suit to transform himself into his deceased mother, whom he revered and feared. During his trial, Ed Gein's mental state was examined extensively. His defense claimed he was insane, a claim supported by his psychiatrist who diagnosed him with schizophrenia. Gein himself showed little remorse for his actions, which he described in detached and matter-of-fact terms. The court found him guilty but declared him legally insane, leading to his commitment to a mental institution rather than a traditional prison. Gein's influence on popular culture is immense. His horrific acts inspired some of the most iconic horror villains in film and literature. Characters like Norman Bates from Psycho, Hannibal Lecter from The Silence of the Lambs, and Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre all draw from the disturbing elements of Gein's life and crimes. These fictional characters, while rooted in fantasy, reflect the real horror that Gein represented. The legacy of Ed Gein remains one of profound fear and revulsion. His crimes were not just murders. They were acts of desecration that defied human decency. The psychological impact of his actions on the community and the nation was profound, bringing to light the potential for evil that can lurk behind a seemingly ordinary facade. Gein died on July 26, 1984, in the Mendota Mental Health Institute. He spent the last years of his life in relative obscurity, his name a dark shadow over the annals of criminal history. His story continues to captivate and horrify, serving as a grim reminder of the darkest corners of the human psyche. Ed Gein became America's nightmare not just because of the horror of his crimes, but because he revealed how thin the veneer of civilization can be. His story remains a chilling example of how the most unsettling nightmares can be rooted in real-life horror. After Ed Gein was caught, the small town of Plainfield was shaken to its core. The terrible things found on his property shocked everyone, and news of his crimes spread across the country. People who thought of Gein as just an odd neighbor were horrified to find out the awful truth about what he had done right in their community. The fear and disbelief went far beyond Plainfield, leaving a deep scar on America's memory. The media swarmed the story, making the case even more terrifying, and turning it into one of the most notorious crimes in U.S. history. If you found this story chilling, share your thoughts in the comments below. Please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more dark and gripping stories from the depths of true crime. The world of true crime is filled with horrifying stories, but few are as disturbing as the case of Richard Chase, a man whose gruesome acts of violence earned him the nickname the Vampire of Sacramento. His story is one of extreme mental illness, unchecked madness, and a string of brutal murders that shocked an entire community. Richard Trenton Chase was born on May 23, 1950, in Sacramento, California. From a young age, Chase exhibited troubling signs that something was wrong. He was a bedwetter until his early teens, had a tendency to set fires, and displayed a disturbing cruelty to animals. These behaviors are part of what psychologists refer to as the McDonald Triad, a set of 3 behavioral characteristics often found in people who go on to commit violent crimes, particularly serial killers. Chase's childhood was tumultuous. His parents had a difficult marriage, marked by frequent arguments and a general atmosphere of tension. Chase grew up in this unstable environment, becoming increasingly withdrawn and isolated as he entered his teenage years. His behavior became more erratic as he reached adulthood, marked by bizarre and violent outbursts that alarmed those around him. Despite these signs, Chase's deteriorating mental state went largely unchecked. In his early 20s, Chase's mental health rapidly declined. He developed a severe case of hypochondria, convinced that his body was undergoing strange and unnatural changes. He believed that his heart was shrinking, that his blood was turning to powder, and that he was slowly dying. In an attempt to cure himself, Chase began to drink the blood of animals, believing it would prevent his own blood from disintegrating. He also started injecting himself with rabbit blood, which led to blood poisoning and his first hospitalization in a psychiatric institution. During his time in the institution, Chase's disturbing behaviors only escalated. He would catch small animals, such as birds and rabbits, and drink their blood. His obsession with blood earned him the nickname Dracula among the hospital staff. Despite these alarming behaviors, Chase was released after a short time, deemed not to be a threat to himself or others. This decision would have catastrophic consequences. In 1977, after his release, Chase's delusions took a darker turn. No longer satisfied with animal blood, he began to believe that he needed human blood to survive. He believed that his blood was turning to dust, and that only by drinking the blood of others could he prevent his impending death. This belief drove him to commit a series of horrific murders that would make him one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. On December 29, 1977, Richard Chase committed his first murder. He shot and killed Ambrose Griffin, a 51-year-old man who was helping his wife bring groceries into their home. This seemingly random act of violence was only the beginning of a killing spree that would claim 6 lives over the course of 1 month. Chase's next murders were even more brutal. On January 23, 1978, he broke into the home of Teresa Wallen, a pregnant woman who was home alone at the time. Chase shot her 3 times before mutilating her body and drinking her blood. He also removed several of her internal organs and took them with him. The gruesome nature of the crime shocked the community and left police scrambling for answers. Just 4 days later, Chase struck again. This time, he targeted the home of Evelyn Miroth, a 38-year-old woman who was babysitting her 22-month-old nephew David. Also in the house were Evelyn's 6-year-old son Jason and a friend of the family, Dan Meredith. Chase shot and killed all 4 victims before engaging in the same horrific acts of mutilation and blood drinking as he had with Teresa Wallen. He also cannibalized parts of the bodies, taking organs with him when he left the scene. The brutality of these murders and the bizarre, ritualistic nature of the crimes terrified the Sacramento community. Police launched an intense manhunt for the killer, but it wasn't until a neighbor of one of Chase's victims provided a description of a suspicious man that they got their break. The description led police to Chase, who was quickly arrested at his apartment. When police searched Chase's apartment, they found overwhelming evidence linking him to the murders. The walls and floor were stained with blood, and his refrigerator contained containers of human remains, including body parts from his victims. Chase admitted to the killings, explaining that he needed the blood to survive because his own blood was turning to dust. He showed no remorse for his actions and seemed to genuinely believe in his delusions. Richard Chase was charged with 6 counts of murder and stood trial in 1979. Despite his obvious mental illness, he was found legally sane and convicted on all counts. He was sentenced to death and sent to San Quentin State Prison to await execution. However, on December 26, 1980, Chase was found dead in his cell from an overdose of prescribed antidepressants. It is believed that he committed suicide. The case of Richard Chase is a terrifying example of what can happen when severe mental illness goes untreated. His story is one of unchecked madness, where the line between delusion and reality became so blurred that it led to the most horrific acts imaginable. The Vampire of Sacramento remains one of the most disturbing figures in the history of American crime, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the human mind. If this story left you shaken, share your thoughts in the comments below. Please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more disturbing stories from the darkest corners of true crime.